All right, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started with today's Lunch and Learn. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate you coming to the first one of this semester. We'll have Kiley Forsythe presenting today. If you need to get some more food, feel free to head to the back and get a few more, some more food if you would like. Just kind of help yourself with that. I wanted to mention a couple of things before we got started today. One of them is the flyer that's on your table. It looks like this, but if you turn over to the back, there's some information on an upcoming event that we have called the Community of Practice on online learning and teaching. If you haven't heard about this, we're really encouraged to have some people come and talk about it. The first one is Friday, so if you're joining us via WebEx, we will have a WebEx for this, so just let us know if you're interested. But it will be in the boardroom here in Memorial, which is just right next door, so feel free to come to that. And then also, Lunch and Learn is the first one of a series, and so we had a card here made for you that's got the other two as well. The one in October, Kiley will also be presenting it, and the one in November I'll be handling. So please join us and put those on your calendar. We're doing questions a little bit different this time, so I know a lot of people, if you're like me, you kind of don't want to ask a question in front of everybody. So we put a couple of question slips on your tables. Also for the WebEx folks, feel free to put questions in the chat room. But those who are in the room, if you want to take those little slips, add your question to it, drop it in the fishbowl on the table. We are planning on going back later after the Lunch and Learn and creating a little video for you guys as kind of a follow-up to today's session to answer all of those questions. So feel free to put anything in that fishbowl that you want, anything that maybe we don't get to today that you're kind of curious about, or something that Kiley might talk about today that you want more clarification on. We do hope to have some time at the end for questions, so just kind of keep that in mind in case we don't get to them. So we'll do that there. And then one other thing I wanted to mention is the survey that's on your table. I know you're always asked to fill these out after every event, but they really do help us know if we're meeting the needs that you expect. So please fill those out for us. Give us some feedback on how we're doing. And everyone joining us via WebEx, you will get that via a link later today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kiley.
All right, can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay. I keep thinking I'm going to get the microphone, and then I realize that it's actually just clipped to me. Okay, so hi. How's it going? All right. So thanks for joining us today. Before we get started, just remember that this is a series, and so if we're going over some things that maybe you didn't expect or you want a little bit more kind of meat for, they'll probably be covered in later sessions. All right? So just keep that in mind as we go. But for today, y'all, we're not clicking. Hold on. We can do this manually. So for today, what we're kind of hoping that you get out of this is that, first of all, you'll be able to kind of explain and know the difference between a correspondence course and distance course, because those are different in many different ways. We kind of hope that you guys will be able to just kind of explain the foundational differences between online and face-to-face, because a lot of times we get, an online course is the same thing as a face-to-face course, just over the internet. And I'm like, maybe, a little, not so much. And then finally, what we really, really hope you get out of this is that you'll be able to create some sort of action plan for your own course. Maybe not a whole course yet, but you'll have an idea of where you need to start moving towards. So, first things first, let's talk about some definitions. And well, if it's not that, then what is it? So I want to start with what an online or distance course isn't. Keep in mind that for us, online and distance are interchangeable terms, and you'll see that in a lot of official terminology as well. But this is actually the definition from the Department of Education, all right? And so a correspondence course is literally a course in which you, the teacher, gathers up all of the materials, packages them, ships them off to the student. The student then, with no further contact with you, or very, very little contact, completes those materials at their own pace, and then returns them for a grade. Note here that they're primarily characterized by being separated from the instructor. There is no significant interaction between the student and the instructor. Correspondence courses are typically self-paced, and then we see the bottom, and this is the one I really want to draw your attention to. Note that it says a correspondence education is not a distance education, all right? And the reason why I wanted to show you this, and particularly a correspondence course, is that correspondence courses are not eligible for financial aid. So we have to be really careful about what we do, what we call things, how we define online courses versus any other kind of course. So if this is correspondence, then this is distance. Essentially, a distance or an online course is a course where the instructor and the student are still separated by place. They can be synchronous, they can be asynchronous, but the key here is that distance courses have substantial interaction between students and instructors. All right, that is the key. And you can facilitate that interaction through the internet, through any sort of CD-ROM, disc, cassette tape. The list was pretty endless there. Any sort of two-way or one-way conferencing, and any other kind of tools that will connect you virtually with other people. So those are the differences. Again, keep in mind, distance education is eligible for financial aid. Correspondence education is not. Okay, so that's what it is. And now I want to kind of move into this portion of the presentation where we really think about, okay, what is a distance course? And so to do that, I think the first thing we have to talk about is what I like to call the time and place conundrum. And this is what really seems to trip most people up about a distance course, because for most face-to-face courses, we have a set time, we have a set place, we know when we're going to meet, we know what we're going to do, we know that there will be physical bodies in the room. And when we get presented with a virtual space where there are no bodies, right, they're just, you know, some fingers on a keyboard somewhere where we're not sure where they are, it becomes a little difficult to interact with that sometimes. So to kind of set the tone here, and people are probably going to argue a little bit with my metaphor here, but the main thing I want you to keep in your mind about the difference between an online or a distance course and a face-to-face course is that your face-to-face courses are way more transient and they're way less bound by physical location. Your distance courses, however, are super fixed. In fact, they're so fixed that they're probably immobile, and they're way, way limited by physical constructs. And you can kind of see in our picture here, what I mean is that your students in your face-to-face courses can move in and out of your classroom, but your students in your online courses are literally confined to this magic box. All right? So that's something to think about, and it's very important to think about it that way. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about face-to-face courses. And I've taught face-to-face, so I'm going to share a little bit of my experience with this. So when I was teaching a face-to-face course, I always knew that, A, I was going to teach at 8 a.m. on Tuesday, Thursday, probably in Carpenter, 102, 301, one of those rooms. So I knew where to go. My students knew where to physically get up and walk to on campus. They knew when they were supposed to be there, right? If they got there at 8:15, they were late. If they got there at 8:30, I just locked the door and wouldn't let them in. Wave at them through the window. I knew, because I was in Carpenter, that every day I would have the same classroom amenities. So in Carpenter, that means you have a table, you might have a chair, you might have half a piece of chalk. If you're really lucky, you get a whole piece. But I knew when I was planning my lessons that these were the things I was going to have to teach with. And when I say clear holiday markers, I mean this. My students really got in tune with the fact that fall break, they didn't have to come to class. They didn't have to come to class Thanksgiving break. Spring break, no one's here. All right? So they knew when they should be somewhere and where they should be. And I always knew those same things plus what I had to work with. The other thing maybe that's not always so clear with our face-to-face courses is that your face-to-face students can really easily move from a literal physical location to a virtual location, back in and back out again. And what I mean by this is, so I would teach every Tuesday at 8, assign something, post it in Blackboard when we had Blackboard, have them work on that all through Wednesday, then we would meet again Thursday, and the cycle would start over. All right, so they have a lot of freedom to move around and kind of work in different modalities. They also have the freedom to wander campus and the internet. Everybody has the freedom to wander the internet, so we're just going to keep that out there. But when I say they have the freedom to wander campus, I mean it's way easier for a face-to-face student to set up office hours with you, to come by your office, right? And it's usually helpful that they're right there in front of you and you can actually look at their paper and say, that doesn't go there. You can physically point it out. They have kind of free reign of student services, right? This isn't just honor code or disability support services. These are things like the help center, the counseling center, student activities, right? They have a lot of access. They have a lot of resources. Similarly, they have access to what I like to call our campus resources. And by that, I mean, typically, you're going to see like gangs of students wandering around the union, picking tables, doing study groups. Same things in the library. If it's a nice day in the fall and the spring, they're going to be camping out on the drill field. All right? So they actually have more access to physical spaces and locations to get their work done. And then finally, they have a way more connected and interwoven campus community. And by that, I mean, they are physically in a classroom with about 24 other people their age who share their interests, who are doing their majors or who are learning their coursework, right? They maybe live in a dorm with people who are their same age. They maybe go to clubs with people who are interested in the same things that they are. They have a whole web of faculty resources, librarians, you name it, right? The web just keeps growing and it's highly interwoven. So they have all of these resources that they can just literally get up and go to whenever they have a chance. Now, this is not to say that anybody's disadvantaged, because there are definitely perks to being an online student as well. But just some basic differences. Your online students have the Canvas course shell. That's where they're going. That is their physical location. And I say course shell because sometimes I see things that aren't necessarily courses that are like floating around in Canvas. I'm like, okay, all right. But that's where they're supposed to go. One of the hard parts of online courses is that our students typically know the semester as a whole as their timeline. And what I mean by that is they generally have a rough idea of when it starts, and they have a rough idea of when it ends, and they have no idea if they get fall break, if they get Thanksgiving break, if they get spring break. All right? So they're usually just kind of looking at, I know it starts August 18th and ends December 4th. Go. The cool thing about being an online student, though, is you're not really limited by your physical classroom. As a student, you have access to all of the tools your professor provides you in Canvas, plus whatever else they want to throw in there. So you actually have the option to really kit out your online course in however you want it in really neat ways. So you can alter those classroom amenities. But the next thing is that our online students, the reality is that they really have the freedom to wander the internet and that's about it. Maybe some of them work on campus, or maybe some of them live close enough that they can come to like Mitchell Memorial or something for a night. But the truth is that they just really, and you can't expect them to have that access. And so what this kind of means is that they have limited access to your office hours, right? Like they're kind of limited to when you're going to be on the internet and available to meet them and not doing something else. They have limited access to student services and campus resources. We do have student services and resources for online students. This isn't to say that we don't. But because of who our students are, right, sometimes they're part-time, sometimes they're graduate students, they may not have the full access that our on-campus student enjoys to the huge web of resources that we have. And probably the big kicker here, and you'll see it again and again in research on online courses, is that they're unlikely to engage in a campus community because they don't have one. And by that, I mean, maybe they're just taking one course and they don't know anybody else in the course, so they're just kind of hanging out by themselves until it's over. All right? And so those are really the differences between our online and our face-to-face students, and really how we kind of need to think and understand how they're different. Okay, so the first thing, and here's why this is important, the first thing that we really need to think about when we're working on an online course is, okay, if time and place are so important for our face-to-face students, how can we then create that for our online students? And I would say the very first thing you need to do is define what time is. And by that, the first thing I usually ask people is like, well, okay, what's a week? If classes start on a Wednesday, is a week then for the rest of the semester Wednesday to Wednesday? Is it Monday to Friday? Is it Monday to Monday? Sunday to Sunday? Right? What is a week? When can your students expect you to expect things from them? How and when do your students progress through work, right? Do you only release your content 1 week at a time, 1 day at a time? Do you kind of give them free reign of Unit 1 until they reach the test, and then nobody gets to move on until the test deadline is passed, right? How do you want them to work on their material? And then how should your online students think about breaks? Do they get a fall break? You know, is that week of fall break, like for your face-to-face students, only going to be like Sunday to Wednesday? And then you're off to the beach and you're not going to answer your email for like 4 more days. Or same thing with Thanksgiving, right? You're going to travel, you may not be as active or as readily able to respond. My favorite one is spring break, because sometimes we get tickets from students who are like, nobody's posted anything in any of my courses this week. Am I like cut off? I'm like, no, it's spring break. Nobody's here. Nobody's teaching right now. So, and I say define it, and I mean actually like physically, verbally, videoingly, tell them these things. Don't assume that they know. The next thing that's really important is to communicate. Good ways to do this are to provide some synchronous office hours for your students. Honestly, the easiest thing to do here is when you're hosting your regular office hours, just put on WebEx. They can pop in and out of that. But give them a chance to actually talk to you, because some students are going to learn better that way. Some people are going to be fine with email. Create a class routine. And what I mean by this is, how many of you guys have a routine when you go into your face-to-face course? Like you start by saying, hey, what's up? You know, here's what we're going to do today, that kind of a thing. Lots of people, right? We all do that. Okay, do something like that for your online students. I realize it sounds kind of silly and maybe a little simple, but that kind of builds a sort of community, or at least a relationship with you, and it shows that, you know, we're not scary robots, that there is an actual person on the other side of the screen. Even if it's just like once a week, making a video to say, hey guys, we took a test last week. Here's what you guys did really well on. Here's what you need to work on. Something like that. Check in with your students. Provide some sort of feedback. And I wrote up here formative and non-formative. So we know that if a student turns in a paper or takes a test, we have to grade it, right? And if it's a paper, we should probably tell them why they got what they got. So that's the formative feedback. Non-formative, though, is equally as important. And by that, I mean, have your students just do some free writing that either doesn't count for any points, that maybe counts for very few, and just say something like, oh, that's a good idea. Hop in a discussion board and say, I like your point. Can you tell me more about that? Honestly, you don't have to do this with every student every single week. Pick 5. Not the same 5, but pick 5 different ones every week. Work your way through your roster. Say something to each of them individually. And all of this is going to lead into establishing a course community. And I'm also going to go ahead and tell you, give your students a space within your course to interact with one another. Let them talk to each other. Because remember, we're in a little bit of a power structure here, right? Like you're the professor, you're the sage on the stage, right? They do sometimes need those people they view as kind of in the trenches with them that they can talk to, that they can talk about their content with, that they can work problems with, that, you know, hey, I don't understand this, can you help me? So give them a discussion board. Give them, you know, tell them that they can set up WebEx links. Find ways to facilitate them talking with one another. All right. The last thing, though, is that you have to force your students to be present. And by that, I mean, you've got to make them interact with you. You have to make them interact with each other. And I say have because I've been an online student. I am a natural introvert. And let me just tell you, if I had it my way, I wouldn't talk to anyone ever. I would just say my little discussion board piece, and I would go do something else. You have to find ways to force them to interact because a lot of them, it may be out of their comfort zone. And to kind of tail end on this, to be able to make them interact with you, to make them interact with one another, to make them interact with what you're teaching, you've got to give them more than videos and quizzes. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, so there's time and place, which is kind of a big thing for most people. But now I want to talk about students. Specifically, who they are and why they're all the same no matter what all the time. So, based on some demographic data that we pull, we know that students who are enrolled in MS State Online are typically more likely to be female. We know that it's highly likely that they're Caucasian, and if they're not Caucasian, they're probably going to be African American. We know that they're more likely to be between 25 and 34, followed closely in the 21 to 25 age range. And then we also know that they're more likely to be located in the southeastern U.S. Mississippi makes up the bulk of our student body, followed closely by Alabama, Florida, and Texas. So that's kind of what we know for a fact. Now, our students self-report that they are more likely to take between 1 and 2 courses at a time, so they're typically part-time students. They are more likely to have a full-time job, and this is self-reported at about 52%. Less than 10% say they don't have a job at all. And then when we ask them why they want a degree, they self-report that they really want to know some stuff. However, that's followed actually pretty closely by they want some money in it too. Okay? That's why we're saying they're self-reported. So that's kind of when you're teaching an online course at MSU, that might be who you're teaching, those demographics. Now, So your online students need to be treated any differently than your face-to-face students. Even though they have full-time jobs, even though they're a little older, even though they want to know something and they want to get paid for it. Absolutely not. Your online students are not special. All right? They are not special. And by that, I mean to think of their circumstances any more than we would think of their circumstances for face-to-face students, right? Just because they have a job doesn't mean that their needs are more important or less important than an 18-year-old freshman who lives here on campus. This doesn't mean that they are superficient or deficient in any way. They are the same. As instructors, it is our duty to view all of our students as the same, as capable of the same things. Now, when I say they're not special, what I mean is you don't have to treat them differently. They are special in their own individual, unique way. All their mamas say they're special. I say they're special that way, okay? But we as teachers should never do anything for our online students that we would not do for our face-to-face, and vice versa. If you're not willing to do it for one, you should never be willing to do it for another. So, not only should your online course in general need to, but MSU actually requires it to challenge your students in an online course as much as a face-to-face course. They should get as much from it. It should be just as hard. It's got to have the same amount of work, right? Just because you can post a video and give a student a quiz doesn't mean that's the same thing that your face-to-face students are doing, all right? Just because that's easy doesn't mean it makes the amount of work equal. And we'll talk about equality versus equity here in a minute, but keep that in mind. You have to offer your online students the same amount of assistance as you would your face-to-face. And by that I mean, if you're willing to take time after class to talk to a face-to-face student about a certain equation, you need to find a way to do that for your online students too. You have to offer the same grading opportunities as a face-to-face course. Now, this one's a little sticky because what we typically see is, hey, face-to-face students, there's this great thing going on campus. Why don't you go there, write up what you see, and I'll give you 10 points extra credit. And then people are like, oh yeah, online students, that's not in Madison, Wisconsin where you are, so you obviously can't do that. Don't do that. Give your online students a chance to find something, to do something to earn that same amount of credit. Because what that does is it kind of unbalances the equity of your online and face-to-face course, which can get us in trouble. So everything you do for your face-to-face students, you got to find a way to do it for your online students as well, in terms of opportunity. Okay, so now we're here, where the magic happens. And I think this is where most of you guys wanted to learn a few things today. So, I said a minute ago, equity and not equality. It would be literally impossible to make an online course and a face-to-face course equal in every single way. Because when we talked about time and place, right, we talked about the fact that they are inherently different things. One is an experience and one is an object. And so you've got to treat them a little differently. And so what I like to say here is equity, not equality. And the idea of equity is a little hard to explain, and so this picture sums it up really well. With equality, everybody gets the same thing, even though that we can see clearly in this picture, right, that 2 of our 3 students don't actually get anything out of the equality, right? They just get a box, and one's still too short and one can't even get on the box. With equity, however, we give people what they need to meet the same end. So your online course isn't going to mirror your face-to-face course exactly. What it's going to do is it's going to build constructs to make sure that everybody gets to this point and no one can't see over the fence. All right, so here's how you need to start thinking about your online course. You've got to adjust your thinking beyond physical interaction and immediate response. Because online learning is not three-dimensional, right? Like you're never, unless they come to graduation, probably ever going to physically be in the same room as your students. All right? So you have to think about, how is this going to work if I can't get an immediate response? The Socratic method could work. It might not work as well. So you've got to get out of three-dimensional thinking. You also have to acknowledge at some point that, and I know face-to-face courses use this too, but it's really prominent in online courses, is that learning isn't limited to just the student interacting with you and your knowledge. With online courses, you're going to learn that students are going to learn more when they directly interact with the content or with one another, not just you. You have to acknowledge at some point that an online course really is an object, and objects take time to build. I have been at CDE for 1.5 years now, and not once has anyone ever come up to me and said, I have time to build that. Let's go. And and I'm waiting for the day. I have hopes that that will one day come, but I doubt it. So what I mean by this is that the way we teach face-to-face is literally pre-built on centuries worth of practice. The Romans did it, the Greeks did it, we still do it today, right? Like, it's pretty tried and true, trial-tested method. But online courses have only been around for about 30 years. We're still learning so much about how people interact with the internet, how they interact with information, that we're still kind of learning how to do this the right way. And part of that is to say that your online courses have way more physical components, right? The course literally has to be physically built within Canvas. You have to make things to put in the course. So it's way more physical. The next thing is that at some point you have to understand the tools and technology that MSU has provided both you and your students with. Specifically, Canvas. You've got to know how to use it if you want to teach a good online course. Now, my advice here is learn how to use something and learn how to use it well. Master one thing at a time. I see a lot of professors who get easily overwhelmed, and really just a lot of people in general. My husband and my mother are also some of these people that they try to learn too many things at once. They're like, I don't know how to do this Twitter, Instagram, Facebook thing. And I'm like, let's just learn Facebook first. Then you can tweet, but not until then. All right? Learn them one at a time. The more you know about them, the more confidence you give your students to actually interact with them as well, and then you can assign them to your students. All right? Don't try to do too much at once. The next thing that you've got to acknowledge is because of the lean towards the asynchronous nature of online courses, that your students are learning a lot on their own time. They are learning a lot without you there. Now, that's okay. That's actually the inherent nature of an online course. And so because of that, it's really important that we make sure that all the things we're doing in our online course, the things that we're building, that we're asking students to do are, in terms of outcomes, content, assignments, that they're all aligned and they all make sense and they work together. The other key there is that they're visibly aligned, because let me just tell you, as an online student, people would post things that were labeled optional reading. And I would look at it and I would go, that might be interesting, but this basket of laundry needs to be folded. And I would always choose the laundry. Also, because they're learning a lot on their own, because you don't get a lot of time with them, you need to make sure that you're using the course to reinforce the most important things. What skills matter? What content matters? That's what the course is for. So for example, I taught comp. I did not actually care that my students at the end of a semester could walk out of my classroom, list all 86 types of logical fallacies that I showed them, provide an example and a definition. I was just happy if they could recognize two. The skill of recognition was much more important to me than them defining something. So reinforce what's important. And you may actually have to decide what's important. And so, here we're kind of coming around here, is that know that just a video lecture will never be enough. And so with that, what I mean is, how many of you guys have seen the studies in the past couple of years that they've done on attention span? Anybody seen it? How we used to like be able to, something could hold our attention for like 6 minutes, and now we're kind of down to 5 minutes and 42 seconds. And that's across all ages, it's across all races, all genders, right? We are all going a drastic downshift in how long something holds our attention. That's bad for us as online instructors. It's really bad because video is a huge tool in our arsenal. But what recent research has shown is that if you're going to do a video, you've got 30 seconds to interest your student. And if you don't have them in 30 seconds, they're gone. The next thing we know is that if the video is longer than 6 minutes, right, roughly the span of our attention, they're also going to leave. They're going to go do the laundry. They're going to go watch something that they actually want to watch. Now, not saying that anybody here has boring videos. I'm sure we all teach really interesting, awesome things that we're really passionate about, right? And it's awesome to us. But for some students, it may not be. And so when you're thinking about your course, you've got to think beyond the video, right? No 50-minute lectures. What research kind of tells us is that we really need to video our use of video to those really hard to grasp concepts so that we can take the time to explain them. We also need to make sure that they're no longer than 10 minutes. And then that on any given subject, we don't have any more than 3. So it's kind of going to force you to really think about, again, what's important. What else can you do in this course? What else are my students needing to learn? And so, are you feeling overwhelmed? I'll admit, it can be a little scary. But you know what? It's going to be okay. Because we at Mississippi State, we have you. And what we have here is our web of resources. I know it's a funny pun, right? It's great. But if you teach an online course, there are resources for you and for your students, right? For you guys, there's us, CDE. There's the OIRE, Office of Institutional Research and Effectiveness. There's CTL, and there's ITS. And we all work together aspects of your course that we are specifically designed to help you with. We're all easy to talk to, and we're pretty helpful. Your students have the library. They have student support services, the Learning Center, the Writing Center, and actually several more that just did not fit on our web. All right? There are resources out there for you. We're just waiting for you to come get us. Because if you don't say, hey, we need some help, we'll never find you. But with that being said, I hope this presentation has given you an idea of how to start thinking about your online courses. And if you're going to join us next Lunch and Learn on October 8th, we're really going to get down into what active learning is on online courses and how to do that. All right, so I guess if you guys have questions, fire away. Yeah, hold on. She's going to get you the mic. So our WebEx people can hear you.
Okay, so I taught online for like a community college, and we had like a very strict like Sunday to Sunday kind of, that was our work week. Is there something does each department have their own thing, or does this? Okay,
It's totally up to you.
that's up to the teacher.
Yep.
Okay.
When you talked about course community, could you give us specific examples on feasible things that can be quantifiable, that we don't have to spend entire time? What will students sort of see what is in it for them, and then how can we grade it without spending an entire day?
So when I think of course communities, I'm specifically thinking of things that might not be graded. I know there's some hesitance sometimes to allow students spaces to work on things together because there's always that fear that they'll cheat on something, right? Or that they'll just do something wrong. It's kind of, and I've seen it in several courses, if you give students a space of their own, and this could be a discussion board, this could be putting them in a group and saying, hey, this is kind of your support group for the rest of the semester, that if you kind of leave them on their own and let them help each other out, give them the opportunity to talk about things and not make it taboo or give them like a lot of restrictions, that they kind of tend to filter to it on their own. This is especially true in graduate courses. Undergraduates, you might have to pull a little bit more, but graduate students, they want that kind of cohort experience. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Other questions?
Yeah, I had a question that kind of dovetails with his, and that is, do you have other ways besides discussion boards to build that community? Because we have a hard time in our classes trying to get students to realize that discussion boards, there should always be an academic tone in those, because otherwise we get people's opinions. And, that one, there's a pedagogical purpose for trying to explain that you need to use actual information to back up your thoughts.
Right.
And there's also the spread of misinformation that comes with opinions a lot of times, especially in history. So we're always trying to push this should be for academic purposes. Is there a way that you can have a separate discussion board, or is there a way to facilitate that? I'm not familiar, on Canvas with, you were saying what you could use WebEx maybe to do that?
You can definitely use WebEx. This is why I sometimes recommend putting students kind of into what I'm going to call like a support group, because then you can kind of actually within Canvas give them their own like little space that has like Google Drive, Google Spreadsheet, PowerPoint. And, sometimes they'll jump in and like ask questions, and someone will jump in later and answer them, that sort of a thing. So that's a way to do it without the discussion board. You can always tell them they can set up their own WebEx meetings like we're doing right now, because it's free for students as well, and they can just do that on their own time. When I say discussion board, what I like to do is I typically, and I put it near the top of the course, is just label it, like student board. I call mine a telephone booth. Don't ask why. I'm not really sure. And I put kind of where you would typically put your question or the instructions that you want your students to follow. I kind of explain, so like, here's a space just for you to kind of ask questions or get clarification or set up meetings. And I don't monitor it very heavily, if that makes sense. So it is literally like very separate from what we're doing in class.
Hey, Kylie, we have a WebEx question. Do you have any tips or techniques to engage students if you already have videos in place that extend beyond the 10 minutes?
So my first tip or trick is to chunk those videos down. Even if they're already recorded, if you use something like Camtasia, they're pretty easy to like bust into smaller segments. So there's that. But I would also say, this is where I say kind of look at your FacetoFace course. See what you do. Think about the things you do there to kind of engage students. And once you and I would say like write it down. Like, are you doing a group activity? Are you doing like some like question answer, a game, something like that? And then once you kind of figure out what it is you do, you can always find a tool online, and usually free, that can help you kind of foster that in your online course. And if you can, shoot me an email, because that's literally what I do. Other questions?
I just wanted to follow up on a couple of the questions that y'all asked. One thing that helps me is to kind of, you know, like Kiley was saying, we've been doing the traditional way of teaching forever. You know, we all kind of know what that is. And so it's easy for me to kind of relate my online course to some of those elements. So if you're thinking about, you know, how do I simulate somehow the in-class discussion where, you know, we ask a question, people raise their hand. So maybe that's the discussion board, you know, where I put that question out there or whatever. Students also, you know, they meet in place in the library or whatever for their work groups. So how can I simulate that? And maybe that's a separate, what she's talking about, that group for just them, or maybe it's a WebEx or something like that. But students also, they do like to talk about stuff that's not necessarily academic. And so I have set up another thing of, this is non-academic, this is, hey, what'd you do this weekend? So, because, you know, when we connect with each other, it's not just about our important whatever. Sometimes they build those connections because they're two military families, and so they can talk about that, or they're, you know, they do races or something, you know, so it helps them connect, which then may help with those other things. And so trying to visualize the different aspects, and I require my students to do at least 1 or 2 asynchronous sessions with me, and that helps me just check in with them. Is everybody doing, you know, we don't necessarily do a lot of heavy teaching during that, but everybody doing okay? And I've taught like International Ag. Tell us some of your stories traveling. What did you learn? Some of those things. So they're really talking more to each other. And so just kind of sitting down and how am I engaging them in all the ways that students like to engage. Some of it's going to be highly academic. Some of it's more connecting. And then, like Kiley said, she can help you if you're like, yeah, but this is what I do in my face-to-face class. I don't know how to do that. You know, I do a game or something in class. It's really engaging. I don't know how to do that online. That's some of the things that we can kind of help you figure out how to engage students.
Yeah, and if it helps, we built an adventure game and an escape room in the past 2 months for online.
Any other questions in the room? I've got one more WebEx question. I think we'll probably wrap up there. And we'll just save any other questions we have on WebEx. And please write down any questions that you have that we didn't get to, and we'll drop them in the fishbowl for you, because we do want to answer those. But here's one more question. So how does the class presentation time relate to the video information that was discussed? Do lectures fade in effectiveness?
Yes, they do. But I say this kind of like put yourself in their position. So my home major is English, and I didn't actually like going to Shakespeare lectures because I don't actually like Shakespeare. But I can distinctly remember like going to class, sitting down. I knew it was going to be an hour and 15 minutes of just my professor sitting at the front of the room talking, right? And by the end of the lecture, I was just in my seat going, oh, can we go? I'm done. I've been done for like 45 minutes. But yes, right, we know that we kind of lose students' attention, and research is showing like 5 minutes, maybe 10. So it's always good, even in your face-to-face courses, to break up the lecture, right? Whether that's having them do some group work, having them go and do some informal writing, having them put some stuff on the board. Just know that I don't know if there's like an exact conversion for us, because we're basing like our 50-minute lectures on the fact that a face-to-face course is 750-minute contact hour, 715 contact minutes, which translates roughly to 3 hours a week for 15 weeks.
All right, great. All right, well, thank you, Kiley. Appreciate it so much. Thank you all for coming today. As we mentioned before, we have the second part of the series on October 8th. So please put that on your calendar, and then the last one will be on November the 13th. And if you have any questions, feel free to meet with Kiley or myself. We're happy to help you. So thanks so much.